It may be hard for newer fans to imagine this, but there was a time not too long ago when the One Piece fandom in the English-speaking world was an almost unnoteworthy subculture. A time when the franchise itself was a relative obscurity, what Zach Logan of the One Piece podcast called a niche within a niche. Even in the online anime community, it was difficult to find fellow fans, and there was basically no chance of meeting anyone in person who was keeping up with the series. Despite recent historical revisionism about the big three shonen in the West, Naruto and Bleach were demonstrably more popular than One Piece by a wide margin. People used to argue that series like Hunter x Hunter, Fairy Tail, and for some reason Toriko actually deserved the third spot, and that Luffy simply wasn't an iconic enough character to compete with the likes of Naruto and Ichigo. When my brothers and I wanted One Piece merch in 2014, we had to drive over an hour to some boutique anime shop, but at the same time, you could grab a Naruto shirt at Target. The DVD aisle at Walmart had Bleach box sets, but we had to order the newest One Piece collections on Right Stuff. God, rest in peace, Right Stuff. At the time, One Piece fans had three main ways of coping with this unpopularity. First, blame 4Kids, and the completely butchered English launch of the series. This was a good coping strategy because it was essentially true. One Piece was a victim of bad distribution, terrible marketing, and even worse, censorship. Second, since you basically had to be online to be a One Piece fan, it was easy to discover that the series was actually massively popular in Japan. That means a lot to a weeb. Sure, fans in the US could argue that One Piece didn't even belong in the big three, but in Japan it was really just the big one. Liking One Piece was thus a sign of being tapped into Japanese culture. It took a somewhat more sophisticated palate. It's like liking Dragon Quest more than Final Fantasy. This stretches the truth a bit, but it wasn't totally divorced from reality. Third, One Piece fans had the benefit of knowing that the series was really fucking good. Honestly, when you're finishing the Alabasta arc and seeing Vivi say farewell to the crew, with tears streaming down your face, you aren't thinking about how many other people are checking for the newest chapter. And even if Naruto was more popular, so what? Everyone knew that series had fallen off years before it concluded, while One Piece was putting out some of its best arcs over a decade in. There was a quality aspect that no quantity could match. Still, One Piece fans yearned for their franchise to get the kind of recognition that its peers had received. We walked around knocking doors like missionaries, trying to convince anyone with a head to come bear witness to the gospel according to Usopp. If people would just give it a chance, if it could just get a good TV time slot, if the English-speaking world could just wake up to what they've been missing, then the series would take its rightful place alongside Dragon Ball and Naruto and the other untouchable shonen mega franchises. And eventually, after years and years of preaching, they got what they wanted. One Piece has gone through an unprecedented spike in popularity in the 2020s. It has become a seemingly unstoppable juggernaut, and unfortunately, the franchise is worse than ever. The rise of One Piece is mostly a tragedy. Being an English-speaking One Piece fan used to mean liking a relatively obscure franchise that had an exceptionally high hit rate. Now, the series is massively popular, but you have to wade through endless oceans of dog shit to engage with it. Some of that is due to the nature of popularity within capitalism. Companies see popularity as demand, and they rush to fill that demand with as much cheaply produced garbage as possible. You don't get to be as big as One Piece without leaving a trail of tacky keychains and ugly screen-printed t-shirts in your wake. Ship enough units, and they'll find a way to turn you into a busted card game. If your fan base is reliable enough to buy a new manga volume every few months, then surely they are also the exact target demographic for a predatory pay-to-win gacha game. Popularity means that there is money to be made, and the interests of profit tend to eclipse those of good taste. Wishing for your favorite franchise to become more popular is basically wishing for it to get watered down with inferior goods. As soon as the One Piece shirts made it into GameStop, the fun was over. There was no spark, no delight, No moment of mutual recognition between two fans. There was just the realization that someone, somewhere, was making a lot of money off cheap fabric. It's pretty similar to how the MCU killed all the mystique of Marvel for a generation of would-be comic nerds. The big companies like to rub your nose in it. The official One Piece card game has a Robin I Want to Live card. That's what capitalism does. It takes one of the most emotionally moving scenes in the entire series, hell, in all of shonen manga, and reduces it to a meme. A flimsy collectible. It's like Shakespeare selling the death of Hamlet coffee mugs. Business is the enemy of art. And speaking of enemies of art, popularity also inevitably attracts influencers. Clout demons will attach themselves to anything they think can boost their stock. That's why Logan Paul is suddenly acting like he has interest in One Piece. The culture vultures are always waiting for their next meal, and things start to look a lot less appealing once they show up. Mr. Beast makes breathing seem lame. I cringed out of my skin when he said he was going to start One Piece. If fucking Logan Paul and Mr. Beast are going to be fans of this series, it would have probably been better for it to stay niche. The fact that their presence hasn't completely killed the franchise's momentum is evidence of just how good One Piece really is. But how much more could it possibly take? If Elon Musk starts talking about Luffy on Joe Rogan's podcast, it might genuinely be time to wrap the whole thing up. Some of this franchise degeneration started before the boom period, though. While the manga remains great to this day, with recent chapters being some of the most engaging in its entire run, the anime adaptation has been fucking terrible since the early 2010s. As the anime caught up to the manga, rather than going to a seasonal schedule or running lengthy filler arcs, Toei decided to just adapt less and less of the source material per episode, stretching the pacing far beyond many fans' breaking points. The pacing is so legendarily bad that even non-fans are aware of it. 2 episodes to adapt a single manga chapter. Recap montages inserted at random just to pad the runtime. Scenes that should pass by in an instant dragged on for 20 or 40 seconds. And scenes that should take 20 or 40 seconds taking up half an episode. It's disgusting. And the animation doesn't even make up for it. The series looks cheap. For years, through Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, it was so motionless and dry that it felt like watching the animation cells slide across the screen in slow motion. You could skip whole episodes without missing anything. While some One Piece fans swear by the new style used since Wano, and it definitely is an improvement, the excessively flashy animation makes the fight scenes totally illegible. Bright lights and fast movements may trick more gullible fans into thinking they're seeing something, but make no mistake, the animators are jingling keys at you in a laser tag arena and calling it art. It's a headache on film. Back in Dressrosa, the animators weren't giving you enough to work with. Now, they're giving you too much to handle. The series went from 24 frames a minute to 24 minutes a frame. The one constant is that the pace they're adapting the manga at is still painfully slow. Even since they switched to a seasonal format, it's still way worse than it ever needed to be. Then there's the Netflix live-action series, which is just as ugly, poorly produced, and unwatchable as their Cowboy Bebop adaptation. But for some reason, there are a bunch of One Piece fans so tasteless that they give it a pass, or even celebrate it. The whole thing looks like a YouTube fan film, or one of those "this is what Majin Buu will look like live-action" ads you used to get on Flash game websites. The costumes are unconvincing, unflattering, sub-cosplay trash. I wouldn't trust any of the main cast to act if their shoes were on fire. But when every actor is bad, you inevitably have to start questioning the direction. I mean, Lara Abova was pretty good in Honey Don't, but she sets foot on that set and all the charisma and charm leaves her body. And this isn't even mentioning the fact the show is run by racist Zionist freaks. We've already made 2 videos about that, so go watch those if you want to learn more. Links in the description. The live action is a perfect encapsulation of the Faustian bargain the One Piece fandom has made over the last decade. On the one hand, your favorite franchise gets to be more popular than ever. On the other hand, there are thousands of people who only know it from an absolutely horrendous live action adaptation. I have had multiple people tell me they are just now getting into One Piece because of the Netflix series, and it feels like hearing someone say they're getting into the Pirates of the Caribbean movies because they saw the porn parody film Pirates 2: Stagnetti's Revenge, and even that is overly hopeful. Many of these people have no intention of ever picking up the manga. They're content to watch the Netflix slop until its inevitable cancellation, at which point they'll move on to whatever the next big Netflix slop series is. With luck, they'll become anime-only watchers, posting 3-minute clips to social media of Luffy throwing a single punch with a caption like, "That's my captain." But being a One Piece fan in 2026 means that you have to contend with all of that. The manga itself, as good as it is, has been pushed onto the sidelines. Space has to be sacrificed to the poor planning of an animation studio, the poor taste of the Netflix SARS, and the interests of big capital. A franchise that was once niche and great has become popular and grotesque. The One Piece fandom got exactly the kind of recognition that they wanted, but they lost the franchise in the process. It's like we're all being punished for our hubris. A finger has curled on the monkey's paw. More eyes are on One Piece in the West than any other point in history, and it's more embarrassing than ever to be a fan. In 2023, a Luffy float took part in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a high point for public recognition of the series. Unfortunately, a tree snagged his straw hat on the way up, leaving it deflated. That image, Luffy on the world stage with his most prized possession hanging limply around his head, so perfectly captures the state of the franchise that it feels like a sick joke. In truth, it was an omen, a sign. We are living in the One Piece fans' century of humiliation.
Endless trash!